Well, thank you, Lauren, so much for that really warm, generous introduction. And can I also echo the acknowledgement of country and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. To Jeremy, that was an incredibly wise and thoughtful contribution and quite touching. So thank you for that, but also for your engagement with all of us in the Parliament across the political spectrum, and for your wisdom at a time that is just so challenging and so tough. And for the invitation to be here. It really is a great honour to be asked to come to Sydney and speak. To Gillian, your courage combined with your wisdom and your engagement and advice is really greatly appreciated by me and by government, as it is by so many in the community right across Australia. And Dr. Hendel, welcome to Australia. It's a long way to travel for 4 days. We wish you all the very best, not only this afternoon in your keynote address, but in your short stay in Australia and in your future, which I've been reading a little about whenever an election might be held in Israel over coming months or years. And to Julian, we don't always agree, but Julian has enormous respect in the Parliament as a man of wisdom, real courage and great intelligence. And he is, of course, as you all know, an incredibly articulate advocate for the Jewish community here in Sydney and right across the country. So it's a great pleasure and honour to share the stage with you, Julian, although I will have to leave before you speak to catch a flight back to Adelaide. No disrespect, please, but to all of you for having me here at this really important conference. Dr. Hendel's topic for this afternoon, Zionism after the earthquake, helped me think about my remarks as I was jotting them down on the flight very early this morning from Adelaide. I do consider myself a deep friend of Australia's Jewish community and the state of Israel. And in that sense, as well as I guess my capacity as a senior minister, it's decades as I've been in Parliament, Lauren, that really does make me start to age myself. I want to talk about our relationship as a government with Australia's Jewish community, with the state of Israel, and the obvious overlap that involves at such a challenging time. For me, the Northern Star in this complex and incredibly heated debate must always be the right of Israel to exist and everything that goes with that right, including obviously the right to defend itself, which I'll say a few things about. But by right to exist, I don't mean, and I don't think we mean, just the bland legal right. What I mean is that it was and it remains the right thing. I first visited Yad Vashem 20 years ago, and obviously, like every visitor to that memorial, that museum, was obviously shaken by the story that it told. But I have to say, as an Australian, I was particularly shaken by reading the story of the Evian Conference in 1938, where Roosevelt gathered nations to see whether a solution could be found to accommodate more refugees fleeing Germany at the time. And I was just so shaken and remain shaken and impacted and shaped in many ways by Australia's statement that was articulated in that display or that memorial to the conference, where Australia resisted taking any additional Jewish immigrants from Europe at the time because it did not want to import a racial problem, to use the words of Colonel White, who was the leading delegate from Australia at the time, not wanting to import a racial problem that we viewed we did not have. The creation of a Jewish state, the only one on the planet after the horrors of World War II and particularly the Holocaust, remains, I think, a beacon of decency out of the most awful period in human history, the most awful chapter. And it was and remains, I think, a moral reckoning for what happened at that time. And Australia's then strong support after the war for the creation and the recognition of the State of Israel is something that fills me with a great deal of pride and something that I think should fill us as a country with a great deal of pride 80 years on, because the history of the past 80 years or so, since the end of World War II, has, to my mind, reinforced the imperative of a Jewish state. It has shown over the course of those 8 decades the stubborn resilience of the oldest hatred in human history, anti-Semitism. October 7 particularly demonstrated that, but we have seen it right through the 8 decades since the end of World War II. And of course, the right to exist as a state, as Lauren indicated I had said before, carries with it the right to defend itself, not passively, but the right to attack forces that are determined to make harm on Israel and its people, let alone forces with a very explicit aim to wipe the state of Israel off the map. As Lauren said, I said not far from here at the 12-month anniversary of the October 7 massacre that of course Israel had a right to take action to defend itself, not just against the threat from the south coming from Gaza through Hamas, but also the threat from the north, from Hezbollah, that started bombing Israel within 24 hours of the October 7 massacre, and the threats from the east, from Iran, from the Houthis. We recognise, as a government, Israel's unique security situation. In the vast continent, Dr. Hendel, of Australia, it is often hard to comprehend just how small Israel is geographically and just how close its enemies are. There's nothing much between Adelaide and Sydney that I flew today of 1,600 kilometres. We have trouble comprehending short distances in a country as vast as this, but we do recognise the uniqueness of the situation that Israel has faced since the first day of its existence as a state. But we have, as the video and as the introductions reminded you, we have as a government obviously expressed strong views about the way in which that right to defend itself has been exercised over the course of the time since October 7, particularly in more recent times. This devastating conflict, of course, we must always remember, all flows from the October 7 massacre, a day that saw the worst loss of life for Jewish people since the end of the Holocaust. Other atrocities like rape and torture, and of course more than 250 hostages being taken, babies, old people, young adults from the music festival taken across the line back into Gaza, probably 50 of whom remain there still today. A deliberate strategy, it seems to all of us, by Sinwar to bomb the possibility of an emerging settlement between Israel and other mainstream Islamic countries, not without any concern for the impact not only on the Palestinian people themselves, but on others as well. But how Israel responds to that attack is the subject of legitimate debate and, as you know, quite significant disagreement across the global community. This does not alter our view about Hamas's role in starting this conflict, its inability to play any role in the future in the region, or the need for the immediate release of the remaining hostages. But our government has, along with other like-minded countries, expressed a number of views about the conflict that don't accord with the position of the Israeli government. The imperative of a ceasefire now, the need for aid, particularly food, to flow freely and to be accessed safely, and our opposition to the current offensive in the Gaza City and to the missile strikes recently in Doha. And we have indicated, again as the video suggests or reported, the government's intention to recognise Palestine at the General Assembly this month, based on a number of commitments made by the PA and by the Arab League, and following similar announcements made by like-minded countries like the UK, Canada and France. Now, we acknowledge and we clearly recognise the deep opposition to some of those decisions, particularly around recognition from the Israeli government. That was made clear from the first discussion that our Prime Minister had with Prime Minister Netanyahu the Thursday before we made the decision as a cabinet and then announced it. And the opposition as well from many in the Australian Jewish community to that decision, and also to some of the positions we have taken about the conflict that I just referred to. But our government is convinced that the decision around recognition is right in terms of its timing. The differences between our two governments, the Australian and the Israeli government right now, are deep, probably deeper than at any time that I remember during my adulthood. But our view, and certainly my view, about the place of the State of Israel in the region and in the global community reflects our long-standing position and has not changed. The right of Israel, the only Jewish state on the planet to exist in peace and security alongside the Palestinian people. And likewise, we remain deeply committed to ensuring that every Jewish Australian can live a contributing life in this great country, in peace and in security. As Lauren said, my great-great-great-grandparents, Abraham and Sarah Baxter, joined that big migration from the UK in the 1870s, 150 years ago, and they were able to live a thriving existence. Abraham used to boast that he laid more railway lines or more miles of railway lines than any other person in Australia, 2,000 miles apparently, as well as tunnels he bragged about. Generations of Jewish Australians in those many, many years since have also been able to live thriving, contributing lives, making an enormous contribution to this country before World War II and particularly with the big wave of migration since. But I know very clearly that Jewish Australians don't feel that level of security, peace and acceptance that even my forebears, I suspect, felt 150 years ago. Gillian's report, among others, but so importantly, Gillian's report documents the huge increase in anti-Semitism, giving scale and comprehensiveness to the experiences that Jewish Australians have been living every single day, particularly since October 7th, from the first time that that appalling protest took place not far from here at the Opera House. Anti-Semitism, we know now, has not just come from the Australian community, but has been fuelled by a foreign state actor in Iran. Australia, like every other country, experiences a broad spectrum of racism and discrimination and has right through its existence. But anti-Semitism is exceptional. Humanity's oldest hatred, its most virulent hatred, as Gillian said in her press conference with the Prime Minister as she was handing her report, shape-shifting over time, but retaining some of those age-old tropes and myths. As I said at the gathering a little while ago, only Jewish schools, including one just around the corner, have security fences and guards. I met with Jewish Care Australia last week at an Australia-Israel Chamber of Commerce meeting in Melbourne, who continue to have to post security guards at nursing homes in Melbourne. I imagine it's the case here in Sydney as well. Nursing homes with Holocaust survivors there who have to be guarded 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I can tell you as the Minister for Aged Care, no other aged care facility has to deal with that. Anti-Semitism in universities, documented by Josh Burns' inquiry, advocated so much by Julie and Lisa over the past period of time, in the arts and even in health. So much in health, notwithstanding the centrality of the Hippocratic Oath to the work of every health professional, has hit alarming, appalling levels. And of course, we've seen that hatred morph into violence, into vandalism, and into arson. And our government remains absolutely committed to doing everything we can to fight this rise in anti-Semitism, with Gillian's report as an important guide to that work. I know that this has been an unimaginably tough, challenging time for Jewish Australians, as it has been for Jewish people right across the world, obviously most significantly in Israel itself. But here in Australia, witnessing on a daily basis from October 7 the death and the destruction of people in Israel, often impacting family and friends. Palestinian Australians have obviously experienced the same anguish as they watch events in Gaza. The rise of anti-Semitism here is an added, deep burden to Jewish Australians. And I know this has been a tough and challenging time for relations between our government and the Australian Jewish community, as we make decisions that we regard as the right ones in the national interests, but with which many in this room and across Australia sincerely and substantially disagree. But there must, of course, after this conflict is over, and we all hope it will be sooner rather than later, there must be a day after. There must obviously be a day after this terrible conflict for Israelis and Palestinians, most importantly of all, but a day after for Israeli-Australian relations between our governments, between our peoples. The Ambassador and I know he's joining you this afternoon, have discussed already the deep issues that we share across good health policy and other areas that don't necessarily go to the core of this conflict. But there must also be a day after for our own community, one that is based on respect and on tolerance and on the sort of wisdom that Jeremy just outlined in his introductory remarks. We deeply respect the work of this federation, almost 100 years old now, and all of the organisations that come under its umbrella. I really am honoured by the invitation to talk to you, particularly at such a difficult time for the community. I apologise for having to leave during Julian's speech to get back to Adelaide, but I wish you all the very best for the day, and I look forward to continuing to being able to engage with your community over coming months. Thank you very much.